Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matty here, and Eevee Grove, the new mini set coming to Pokemon Pocket, releases in just 2 days. The rank season just wrapped up, so now we can look forward and look ahead to this next metagame and this next format. That's what we're going to be doing in today's video. I'm really excited. We've already talked a little bit about all of the new cards coming in the expansion that were shown in the trailer. That's what's up on the screen here. We've got, of course, all of the eeveelution cards, some of the trainer cards, things like that. In this video, we're going to be talking strategy. We're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about each one of these eeveelution cards. And we're going to be going over what I believe is going to be like the best ways or the best strategies in which we're going to be, using these cards in decks. So we're not going to be showcasing any deck lists. We're going to wait until the full set releases. So I know some people are just kind of interested in like copy pasting decks, and I understand that completely. But regardless of what cards come out in the new set or what cards are available right now, we can go ahead and utilize the strategies and the ideas that we're going to be going over in this video. That way you guys will be prepared to build your own decks and, sort of fulfill your own strategies when the set releases and we get the full set list. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that for sure. I think there's going to be some surprises. I will say that. I think a lot of the cards that were announced right now are really good. That's definitely what we're going to dive into today, but definitely expect some really crazy cards to probably come out in this set that they have not showcased yet. We'll talk about a little bit about that at the end of the video, about maybe some speculatory cards that I think might be coming in this particular expansion. But anyway, let's just dive right into it, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned. A bunch of deck lists, a bunch of coverage and stuff for the new expansion will be coming in the next few days, especially when the set releases. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Anyway, let's dive right into it. So first and foremost, I think most people understand Eevee. Some people were a little bit confused about it, but this particular card realistically is just another Eevee that we can play. We've never had like a basic EX Pokemon that is meant to evolve. That's just never been the case. I know some people were confused about that. Pikachu EX cannot evolve into Raichu EX, which doesn't exist, or any Raichu card. So this is particularly unique. What this allows us to do is basically play 4 copies of an Eevee card in our deck, whether that's 2 copies of Eevee and 2 copies of Eevee EX, and then evolve or play, as many, I guess, stage 1 eeveelution cards as we want. We've never seen anything like this in Pocket. It's going to be very interesting to see how the decks flow and how much more consistent they are playing 4 copies of Eevee. Now, this is still a 2-prize Pokemon. It's an EX, so if it gets KO'd, and it only has 90 HP, which is definitely a little bit scary. All of the Silvali's running around, but again, I believe if we're playing Eevee EX, we're probably playing multiple eeveelution copies, probably like 4 or more in the deck, so very likely that we should be able to evolve this pretty early. We can do 30 damage for 1 energy, and that is somewhat relevant for sure, especially when you consider all of the other eeveelution cards that are kind of coming out in the set. So yeah, anyway, retreat cost of 1, it is weak to fighting. I don't know exactly how relevant that is, but yeah, I think this card is going to be good. I think there's going to be scenarios where hitting for 30 on your first turn going second, and then evolving and then doing whatever damage your eeveelution card does is going to be pretty relevant for sure. But anyway, that's the Eevee EX, kind of the centerpiece of this particular set. The first eeveelution card that we're going to dive into in terms of strategies is going to be Flareon EX. So I posted about Flareon and Arcanine in a community post earlier, talking about how this is just basically Arcanine but better. Some people, disagreed with me, and that's totally fine. You guys can feel free to disagree, but I personally think Flareon is really strong. 130 is 130. There's a lot of really relevant Pokemon in the format that attack for less than 130 damage. The breakpoints are definitely different in this current format. We still have access to, Giovanni, to Red. We're hitting for weakness on things like Solgaleo, like Buzzwole. We also have the new Eevee bag, which we'll take a look at. So the damage for Flareon is pretty relevant. Yes, we are discarding 2 energies from this Pokemon when we attack, which, definitely seems like a pretty significant downside. But the main advantage for Flareon is going to be this ability. I think a lot of people are underrating this particular ability, and I think it's kind of the key as to how we're going to be playing Flareon and which strategies we're going to be utilizing Flareon EX in. So the ability here, once during your turn, you may attach a fire energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon, and if you do, you'll deal 20 damage to this Pokemon. Now, the damage that you deal to Flareon, in my mind, isn't that relevant. Yes, 20 damage is a considerable amount. However, we're only going to be using Combust, maybe once, before we bring Flareon into the active spot. So that's realistically at the most, we're going to be like 20 damage. And then we have things like Potion, we have PCL, we have Pokemon Center Lady, and then we have the new Eevee bag, which also heals from your Flareon. So because this damage is dealt on your turn, it's basically kind of irrelevant. Something like a Giratina EX, which does 20 damage after it attacks, doesn't allow you to heal yourself back up after your turn ends, and then it turns into your opponent's turn. So Giratina EX effectively has 130 HP. Flareon has the ability to get set up and then come in still at full HP, so I don't think the damage that it's taking is a big drawback. But again, the combustibility here is absolutely broken. And again, that's how we're playing Flareon. Generating, or I guess recycling energies from the discard pile is going to be very, very strong. Basically, Flareon is a Pokemon we're going to be having on the bench, and we're going to be setting it up basically in conjunction with whatever Pokemon is in the active spot, you know, attacking and probably discarding. There's a lot of strong leadoff Pokemon that are fire types that discard energies when they attack. This basically is a downside, but because we have Flareon, a lot of those Pokemon that were pretty decent, but again, they discarded energies when they attacked, this kind of turns it not much into a downside. So there's a lot of options that we're going to go into here, but that's, I think, the core strategy with Flareon. It's going to sit on the back line, and it's going to go ahead and recycle those energies that whatever Pokemon in the active spot is discarding. Probably non-EX Pokemon, which those Pokemon will be. We'll go over those options right now. But as we are attacking, doing some damage, discarding energies, we're just going to recycle those energies and put them right back on Flareon. And I think that's extremely powerful. In fact, basically, like all of the best decks in the current format right now are Ultra Beast decks. And the main reason why the Ultra Beast decks are so strong right now is because of Lusamine. Energy is the main resource in Pokemon Pocket, so any Pokemon that can generate energies or recycle energies, any card that can do that, is extremely, extremely good. A big reason why Ultra Beasts were so good was because of Lusamine. Giratina EX, maybe the strongest Pokemon in the entire game because it generates additional energies. Flareon has a very similar effect. It is somewhat balanced. I'm not saying this card is absolutely broken, but it is going to be very, very, very strong. 130 is 130. This is a very, very good Pokemon. So what Pokemon should we be pairing with Flareon? We do have some options, so we're going to go ahead and do something really fun here. We are on PokemonZone.com. They do have an advanced filter here, so this is going to be pretty cool. What we can do is filter through like all of these Pokemon here. Colorless or Fire-type Pokemon is what we'll do. We're not going to determine whether it's a stage Pokemon or not. Probably no EX Pokemon, but we'll say any, no Ultra Beast. Sure, it can have an ability, whatnot. What we want to do here, I think, is filter by... We'll filter by all of these here. Yeah, this will be the easiest way to do it, I think. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and filter. So we'll filter by all Fire-type Pokemon, and we can just kind of go through and point out which ones I believe are probably going to be pretty good pairings for Flareon. So the first thing that comes to mind is actually going to be Ninetales. So this is the OG Ninetales that we played with Blaine. So that is one effective strategy that we could pair with Flareon. We are playing multiple Stage 1 Pokemon, so that could be a little bit inconsistent, but Ninetales, when powered with Blaine's, can do a lot of damage. I believe it's like 120 with the Blaine's boost. But for 2 energies, 90 damage for a Stage 1 Pokemon, and then we discard 1 energy from this Pokemon. So again, we could pair it with Blaine's. We could go into Ninetales as our leadoff. It's a single prize Pokemon, so we could even go through 2 Ninetales, and we just keep hitting our opponent for 90 or even more damage with Blaine. And then every single time we discard an energy with Ninetales, we can bring it back with Flareon, dealing a little bit of damage to Flareon, but effectively utilizing something like Ninetales, which was really good for its time. But the only downside was that we weren't able to go into another Ninetales very easily or go into another Pokemon quite easily. So Ninetales is going to be pretty decent for that. Now, unfortunately, Ninetales is a little bit rough going first because it takes 2 energies to attack, but that is certainly one strategy. We could be playing Blaine's, and we could be playing Ninetales here paired with Flareon. I think that could be a pretty decent option if we're being entirely honest, which, you know, I'm always honest with you guys. One thing to note here as well is that we don't necessarily have to play any of these Pokemon that discard energies when they attack. We could just be playing some really generic, you know, basic Fire-type Pokemon, similar to how Buzzwole plays just these basic Grass-type Pokemon like Kartana, like Pheromosa. We don't really have any equivalent options, but even something like a Heatmore, which is just a basic Pokemon that attacks for 1 energy, we could kind of just lead off and do some chip damage, and then when Heatmore goes down, we just go into another Heatmore. We move that energy to Flareon, we attach to Heatmore, and then we just sort of repeat and recycle. So we're able to basically go like Heatmore into Heatmore and then finish off with Flareon. That potentially could be enough, right? 30 damage, you know, times 1 or 2, plus the 130 from Flareon might be enough to kind of KO whatever, and then Flareon can kind of just sort of continue to attack and then end games that way. So this is not something to write off. These Pokemon like Heatmore, which don't have like any discard effects, but are just sort of 1 energy basic Pokemon, are honestly probably fairly decent that you could also be pairing with Flareon for sure. If we go down a little bit, I don't think there's anything super relevant in terms of colorless Pokemon. However, Silvally is a decent option, or really any of these basic colorless Pokemon like Farfetch'd or Kangaskhan, you technically could play with Flareon, even though they don't discard energies. What do we got next up? Magmar, I believe, is another card here. We could even just pair this with Flareon. This also works with Blaine's. It's a basic Pokemon. Very similar to Ninetales. The 80 damage is less than 90, but it might even be worth running. Just 1 less HP, or 10 less HP, 10 less damage, but it's a basic Pokemon. So this could even be a pretty decent option as well to pair with Flareon. If we go back, I believe we went by it, but Flareon, the small Flareon, could also be a decent option, mainly because we could just play 4 copies of Eevee and then go into either Flareon that we want, whether it's the non-EX or the EX version. The thing with this Flareon is it does take 3 energies to attack. So again, going first, there's really no great way to basically utilize Flareon or attack with it very early. If you're going first, that's not until turn 4. You're probably not living that long anyway. So I don't mind Flareon. It might just be an option that we throw in with Flareon EX just to have maybe an additional evolution Pokemon that we could utilize. It very much is very similar to Flareon EX. It's just, of course, not as strong. So again, you got to keep that in mind. We do have a Flareon card that's not an EX, so you can play technically multiple copies of Flareon and Flareon EX in the same deck because they're technically different Pokemon. But anyway, yeah, I think that Silvally could be a decent option, but if we go down a little bit, some stuff is definitely a bit more interesting, and we'll kind of get to it here in a little bit. So Infernape is another really interesting one. Theoretically speaking, Infernape is really strong, 140 for 2 energies, but you discard all of those energies from this Pokemon. So technically speaking, Infernape could be actually a decent pairing with Flareon. It just might be a little bit awkward to get Infernape out early and Flareon. That's just a lot of evolution Pokemon, but theoretically speaking, it does have some decent synergy. So just another thing to keep in mind. Let's keep going here a little bit, see if we can find anything else that could be effective. Volcarona is also an interesting option. It discards energies, does some bench damage, another stage 1 Pokemon, but like I said, this is, of course, 3 energies to attack. So the leadoff Pokemon that we want to pair with Flareon predominantly are going to be low energy attack cost Pokemon that are very easily, kind of spin upable. We can kind of get them going really quickly, whether they discard energies or not. That's probably what we're going to be looking at in terms of which Pokemon we want to pair with Flareon. But honestly, kind of anything works. Like, again, I'm kind of thinking like the Buzzwole decks playing Kartana and Pheromosa. Those are the type of cards that we probably want to pair with Flareon, right? Just because it's the same concept as Lusamine, you know what I mean? That's sort of how it kind of works for sure. If we go down a little bit, there were some more interesting options that I had in mind here. I just got to scroll down so we could find them. Here's a very, very interesting one. This is going to be the fire type Oricorio from the Celestial Guardians expansion that never really saw any play. And this has the Kindle attack. This is a basic Pokemon for 2 fire energies. It does 40 damage, but you discard a random energy from both active Pokemon. So not only are we able to get those energies in the discard pile to bring them back up into our Flareon, but we're also discarding an energy from our opponent, forcing them to maybe stall for a turn. This is a very effective anti-ramp card. This is a really interesting card. Now, again, going first, it's going to feel bad because this thing's sitting in the active spot for like 3 turns until we can attack, but going second, this actually could be pretty good. I think this card is definitely a bit underrated, so Oricorio could be a really, really interesting inclusion to Flareon, or a partner for Flareon that could both disrupt your opponent and discard and put energies in your discard pile to set up your Flareon. So this is a very, very interesting option. I actually really like Oricorio. I think it has a lot of potential. And then, of course, if we continue to go down, we'll probably see some stuff that's maybe a bit obvious. Turtonator is another one, so we all know the Kiawe Turtonator stuff. This might end up being the most obvious option. Turtonator Kiawe is a really, really strong leadoff here. 90 damage for 3 energies, but we just Kiawe, so we can set this thing up really easily. It's a basic Pokemon. And, of course, the upside to that we also have to talk about with Flareon here is that yes, like there's going to be those scenarios where we lead off with Eevee, right? And that's not going to feel very good, you know what I mean? Because like, of course, it's the Pokemon we would rather have on our bench and not in the active spot. But one thing they have to keep in mind, especially with Turtonator, is that even if we do lead Eevee, we can just attach a fire energy to it, manually retreat, discard that fire energy, evolve into Flareon, and then bring that fire energy back up. So it effectively, Eevee effectively, with if you're playing Flareon, acts basically like it has free retreat at the cost of just 20 HP. So leading Eevee in Flareon decks isn't actually going to be that bad because we can just manually retreat, bring that energy back up, and then we basically conserve that energy. We are wasting the attachment for a turn, which isn't going to be great, but if we're playing Turtonator, that doesn't really matter because we're just going to end our turn by playing Kiawe. So Turtonator could be a very, very effective option, might even be the best option to pair with Flareon. We'll have to wait and see. And then lastly, if we go back down, there's going to be one thing in particular that I know some people might be just in general kind of interested in or not interested in, but they might be like, okay, yeah, that does make sense. You know, Oranguru could be also a pretty decent option, right? You just kind of stall. You're just stalling. So you can get a couple energies on Oranguru, do some chip damage. When that energy gets discarded, we just bring it up with Flareon. It is what it is. Like, we could even pair it with Draudigon, to be honest with you. You could even play Draudigon with just fire energies. But Oranguru was another kind of similar option to Oricorio. Yeah, anyway, I think Oranguru is also a fairly interesting option. Really, any of these kind of lead-off Pokemon that are colorless or fire-type Pokemon that, have low energy in their attack cost is really all it comes down to. We'll have to see exactly how things kind of operate. Sylazar could be another one. There's so many of these different kind of options that might just work pretty properly with Flareon. Anything that has like 1 energy in its attack cost and is a basic Pokemon is going to work really well, because it'll effectively work the same way that Kartana and Celesteela does with Buzzwole. So you got to keep that in mind as well. Some people have mentioned Blacephalon. The thing with Blacephalon is it kind of functions in the same kind of way that Flareon does. So like, that's the interesting thing about Blacephalon, is that functionally it's actually kind of like the exact same card as Flareon, just not as good, because Flareon can attack, live an attack, and then attack again. So it's a little bit better of a closing option than Blacephalon does. It's also a little bit easier to get it set up. We don't have to find the Pokemon, find the supporter card, and then do that multiple times, right? With Lusamine and Blacephalon. With Flareon, we can just utilize one Flareon, and then we don't really have to worry about, getting KO'd after we KO, because we have a lot of HP. And we don't deal damage to ourselves after we attack. So we're going to wrap this up here with Flareon. So we also have Sylveon. So we could just play Sylveon, honestly, with Flareon. I don't think that Sylvally, sorry. Sylvally's a really just strong leadoff Pokemon. It's colorless. It's 2 energies to attack. It's kind of the same deal. Theoretically speaking, you could just go like Sylvally into Flareon and probably be pretty decent. I'm not going to lie. We basically just manually attach every turn to our Sylvallies or our type nulls. As long as we don't get KO'd on turn 2, or if we're going second, we should be always ahead on the energy curve. That might end up just being the best way to play Flareon, is with Sylvally, because it's tried and tested. So I wouldn't be surprised, if we just play sort of Sylvally Flareon. Geez Louise, my phone just fell out of my pocket, made a bunch of noise. But anyway, yeah, we have Gladion, so playing all of the stage 1 Pokemon probably wouldn't matter that much. So keep that in mind. Sylvally could just be another top option. But yeah, anyway, I think that Flareon's very underrated. I think it's very flexible. So many different ways that we can play it. It's going to function very, very similarly to how the Ultra Beast decks function right now with Lusamine, which is fundamentally broken. And I think that Flareon is going to be one of the stronger Pokemon to come out in this expansion. I assume so, but who knows? Anyway, we spent a lot of time talking about Flareon. Let's move on a little bit quicker. Next up is going to be Sylveon. So how do I feel about Sylveon? It's hard to know. I don't think that Sylveon is a Pokemon that we can really build around. I think Sylveon is a card that really enables a lot of other strategies that we've seen in Pokemon Pocket. I know some people don't fully believe in this ability or understand that it's that good. Theoretically speaking, we are drawing 2 cards whenever you evolve, and that is really strong, but you have to play 2 cards in order to get that effect, right? So it's like we're playing 4 cards in our deck to draw 4 cards, which obviously doesn't feel that cool, but at the same time, Professor's research is similar. You're playing 2 cards in your deck to draw 4 cards, so it is better effectively than Sylveon, but it's going to be similar to like Shiinotic. In theory, I thought the same thing about Shiinotic. I was like, this card probably isn't worth running because we have to play 4 copies of the card in our deck to then find Pokemon. Sylveon's a little bit different because it's not targeted search. Shiinotic sometimes is useless, especially in the late game, because we don't have any Pokemon in our deck, so Shiinotic's not doing anything. In the early game, it can be good to thin those cards out of your deck, but the thing with Sylveon is that it's untargeted search. It's just draw. You're just drawing cards. So regardless of whether you have all your Pokemon or all your item cards or whatever, as long as you have cards in your deck, Sylveon is providing value to you. So even though it might not feel like it's like that strong to some people, I know some people are maybe just kind of feeling like this wasn't going to be a good card. It's not like you're running 4 cards to draw 4 cards. You have to look at Sylveon and think that this is effectively like playing 16 cards in your deck, which is going to make your deck faster, more consistent, more streamlined. That's really what Sylveon's all about. Now, it does have 140 HP. The attack is somewhat irrelevant. 70 damage, it's psychic energy. So, we're not able to attack with Sylveon unless we play it in psychic type decks. But I mean, to be honest with you, it could even work better in Solgaleo. We'll have to see. Like, we just don't know. You don't attack with Shiinotic and Solgaleo. That deck loses to Oricorio anyway. And Sylveon, I don't know. I haven't done like the math. I haven't done all of the calculations, but Sylveon statistically might even be a better card for Solgaleo than Shiinotic is. So interesting to note. It also has a retreat cost of 1 too. So that is pretty relevant. But Solgaleo likes to play, utilize Shiinotic just because it doesn't have to worry about the retreat. So So whether Shiinotic's in the active spot or not, it doesn't matter. Also, like being an EX Pokemon doesn't really matter for Sylveon either, especially like in that particular scenario like Solgaleo, because your opponent's going to have to go through Sylveon and Solgaleo, and that's kind of a tall task anyway. So it doesn't really matter. You're going to be pairing Sylveon with some other EX Pokemon just so that the prize math doesn't kind of screw you over at all. But I think Sylveon's really strong. Maybe there's some Psychic type Eevee archetypes like with Espeon. Like there might be like a Psychic package that we play Sylveon with, but at the end of the day, the effect is strong. Whether it's Seize Play or not is kind of determined on the other cards that you pair with it. I don't think we're building a deck specifically around Sylveon, but yeah, I think we're probably going to end up playing this card very similarly to how we're playing Shiinotic right now. So of course that would be, you know, like a Solgaleo. You know, Solgaleo EX, which, you know, we pair right now with Shiinotic. The main reason here is with Rising Road, so more consistently allows us to move through our deck. We just kind of effectively attach all our energies to Solgaleo. We can use Rising Road and kind of go right into it. You even could play Sylveon with like Lunala just to more consistently go into Lunala, and then we could even just move the energies around to Sylveon because it is also a Psychic Pokemon. So I know that we see Shiinotic mostly right now in Solgaleo decks, but Sylveon, we could, if we wanted to utilize it as an attacker, we could actually just play it in Lunala decks, like with like Lunala and Giratina, and I think that could be actually really, really strong. So I will pull up Lunala because some people maybe don't really remember what this card is, but also a ton of HP. It only does 100 damage, but we can move our Psychic energies around. So we could effectively play like Espeon, Sylveon, Lunala, and Giratina in just a ton of Pokemon decks, like an absolute Psychic type pile deck, which we've seen before. So effectively throwing Sylveon maybe with that Psychic type, you know, Lunala archetype could be pretty good because we could use it as an attacker if we had to. It also has a retreat cost of 1, which is pretty decent. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Sylveon. I don't think, you know, it's hard to really say right now, but like 70 damage is 70 damage. It's not terrible for 2 energies, but it's kind of hard to really justify exactly or know exactly how we're going to be utilizing Sylveon, but I do think the ability is strong. Psychic type is interesting. There's a lot of strong Psychic type Pokemon and decks in the game, so we'll just have to wait and see, but could be an effective replacement for Shiinotic in some decks. Maybe even Magnezone. Like it might even be better. Maybe not in Magnezone. I don't know. I think in like rare candy decks like Solgaleo, Sylveon would be better, but Magnezone probably prefers Shiinotic because you need that stage 1, you need that Magneton. So Shiinotic being a little bit more likely to draw you the stage 1 Pokemon, whereas like the rare candy decks don't need the stage 1, they just need the stage 2. It's interesting. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe it's the inverse. I don't know. The difference between finding a Pokemon or just drawing 2 cards is interesting from like a mathematical perspective. I haven't done like the calculation, so I don't know particularly which one would be more effective in the deck list. We'll have to see. But anyway, I do think Sylveon's going to be strong and likely played pretty similarly to Shiinotic, but will maybe also find its way into some specific Psychic type archetypes where we could attack with Sylveon. So that's how I feel about Sylveon right there. Again, feel free to comment below about all of this stuff. I'm going kind of in depth here. This might be a long video. I would love to hear your guys' opinions, but we're just brainstorming here. We're going deep. We're really, you know, strategizing and thinking about what we can do here. A lot of the stuff that we've thought about, like when if we go back to Flareon, a lot of the Pokemon that we showcased that might pair well with Flareon, you have to just think to yourself, we might get a new card in this particular set that effectively does the same things, just better than the cards that we looked at to pair with Flareon. So, you know, the concepts that we're kind of coming up with and the cards that we're, you know, showing as examples, they might just come out with like a new or better version of those particular cards, and then we would just use those cards with Flareon or Sylveon. So keep that in mind. We don't know what's coming in the set. Could just be the same concepts that we're talking about, but just improved on. We'll have to see. Next up is Leafeon. So Leafeon's an interesting one. I don't know if Leafeon EX is good enough. That's honestly my main opinion with Leafeon. We can go ahead and pull up Leafeon EX because this is a card that people have tried to play time and time again. Leafeon EX is just a little bit underwhelming. So for 3 energies, we do 70. We have 140 HP. It's very similar to Sylveon, but we have the Forest Breath ability. So once during your turn, if this Pokemon's in the active spot, you can accelerate a grass energy from your energy zone to one of your grass type Pokemon. That can be including Leafeon. So the 3 energy attack cost here is really a 2 energy attack cost. So going second, Leafeon can attack for 70 on its second turn. But the thing with Leafeon is it doesn't have that much HP. We do have access to Leaf Cape now and Erika's, so Leafeon can be pretty tanky. But it's not going to be that tanky. Like it's hard to imagine Leafeon living longer than like 3 or 4 turns against most decks in the metagame right now. Also, like even with Leaf Cape, we're getting KO'd by Charizard, right? 170 isn't safe from a Stoke Charizard attack, so that's a big downside if Charizard sees a lot of play. I just don't think Leafeon could ever see play, unfortunately. But Yeah, the ability here to generate extra grass energies is what I think kind of synergizes really well with the small Leafeon. Again, we are going to be adding a lot of consistency to this deck in the sense that, Leafeon, we can play 2 copies of the non-EX and then the EX, so effectively playing like a 4-4 lineup, and gives us basically the ability to always go into that stage 1 Pokemon pretty early. We could also play Leafeon similarly to how we play Sylveon EX, or did back in the day, where we actually used it as like a ramp attacker. I actually think that's pretty underrated in the format right now. I know Charizard is kind of flying around and stuff, but Celebi with Leaf Cape has a decent amount of HP. So theoretically speaking, I mean, this particular strategy could be okay. Like, we could just go in on turn 2 going first and just attack for, 30 damage, and then attack for 50 and then 70. And if we live a long time, then we live long enough, right? So it could be more of an aggressive sort of, attacking option, which I think is kind of an underrated aspect of this particular card, is the idea that, like, if we are going first, we can technically do damage on our second turn and then our third turn, and that slowly increases. So the longer it takes for our opponent to KO us, the better situation we're kind of in. But again, this does have some inherent synergies with Leafeon EX. I just don't know if this strategy in general is going to be good enough, even with all of the grass support that we have right now. There's a lot of these kind of grass type cards. Like, again, Celebi is one of them. We also have Superior, so you got to keep that in mind. If we wanted to play an absolute pile deck with, like, Superior with the full Superior line, and of course all of the Leafeon cards, then maybe we have something going for us. But that's a ton of different Pokemon. Superior, of course, going to double the grass energies attached to Leafeon, so any damage that we're doing with Leaf Blast here would be effectively doubled if Superior is in play. So that's something to keep in mind, maybe. But we've seen those Celebi type decks. We've even seen like Celebi with Leafeon in Superior, and it just hasn't ended up being a really good card, mainly just because these ramp decks can just 1-hit KO you no matter what, especially Charizard. So that's always been the downside, and I think that Leafeon and Leafeon EX isn't really going to be any different. I don't know how else we could play Leafeon. I think it's really kind of meant to be exactly like that. There could be some funny strategies where just, like, for whatever the reason, we just pop off and we do a ton of damage, like in some matchups that just allow us to kind of fill Leafeon with a bunch of energies. But if we're playing Leafeon, we might honestly just rather play Celebi. It's got more HP. Yes, it's a EX Pokemon, so it's got 2 prize cards. But the thing is, like, when you're pairing a non-EX Pokemon with an EX Pokemon, you're basically allowing your opponent to KO just 2 Pokemon to win the game. Leafeon isn't something that you're going to bring out very early, and unfortunately that's just kind of the case. We don't have any way to really conserve grass energies like we do with fire energies. So I don't know. I don't love Leafeon. I just don't think it's going to be that good. I could be wrong, but unfortunately I think it's going to probably fall to the same downsides to Celebi. Unfortunately though, it's guaranteed damage, so that's the main difference, right? Celebi flips a coin to deal that damage. Leafeon doesn't, so at least you're guaranteed, and that's why effectively it's going to be better as, I think, like an early game sort of ramp attacker. Again, going first, this card isn't bad, right? Think about it. Like, you're doing 30 damage, and then you're doing 50, then 70, and it kind of snowballs from there. But it's just about, are we going to live long enough? That's really the one question I have with Leafeon. It definitely feels like sort of a game closer here, but I don't know how we're going to effectively get all those energies on Leafeon. So very kind of middling to me. I just don't feel very strong about Leafeon regardless. Vaporeon is somewhat of an interesting one. I think this might be sort of the least played version of Vaporeon. One thing to consider is that we do have multiple other Vaporeons, right? This Vaporeon has 120 HP, which it is a water type Pokemon, so we have access to things like Irida, we have access to Manaphy, Misty. We have a lot of water type support cards in terms of energy generation and some healing, so that does give it some bit of an upside here. We do 70 damage for 3 energies. We flip a coin until we get tails, and we discard an energy from our opponent's Pokemon for every heads that we get. So it's effectively Grindcore. It's Guzzlord, but it doesn't have as much HP, and it's 3 energies instead of 2, so it's somewhat balanced, I guess, in that sense. But yeah, Vaporeon here is going to be a very interesting card. I don't know, like, it's tough, right? Because technically speaking, as far as like water evolutions go, we do have like Glaceon already, but the thing with Glaceon is that it's pretty underwhelming. It's one of the most underwhelming EX cards we've gotten in Pokemon Pocket. 3 energies, 90 damage, and we've got Snowy Terrain. During Pokemon Checkup, when you're in the active spot, you do 10 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So unfortunately, it has to be in the active spot, which is the main downside to Glaceon. It doesn't have that much HP. With Giant Cape, we go to 160. We are weak to metal, so without Giant Cape, we're getting 1-hit KO by Solgaleo. It's just tough. Like, theoretically speaking, we could play, Glaceon, 1 copy or 2 copies of it in a water type EV deck, but we also have the other Vaporeons. We actually have several Vaporeons that are in Pokemon Pocket. We have the Washout Vaporeon, which is probably one of the stronger ones. This allows us to move our water energies from one of our bench water Pokemon to our active, like however we want, very similar to Lunala. So this could definitely see some play, just because like if we're playing a water type evolution deck, it probably makes sense to just play one copy of Vaporeon, the Washout version, because this is theoretically a fairly strong card. I just don't really know how I feel about it in that particular sense. And then we also have, if we go, I think we have another Vaporeon that heals or something like that. Is this the one from base set? I think so. Yeah, it's from Genetic Apex. So this does 60 and then you heal 3 damage, 30 from this Pokemon. I think this particular Vaporeon is pretty bad. So all of the Vaporeons are kind of interesting to me. Theoretically, you can play just 4 copies of Vaporeon and 4 copies of Eevee, and that's somewhat consistent. I just don't think really any of them are that strong. So it's really hard for me to think that this Vaporeon is going to see that much play. It's also not a guarantee that you discard any energies. 70 is awkward. We're not really KOing many Pokemon in 2 hits. I guess Flareon, I guess is what Vaporeon can do pretty well. Against Flareon. It's probably a direct counter to Flareon, but I don't really expect it to see that much play. Just probably not strong against many other particular archetypes in the game. So yeah, I don't have too many ideas with Vaporeon. I think it's just going to be, you know, it's standard kind of water stuff. It'll be pretty tough for water to see a lot of play in Pokemon Pocket. We are one-hit KOing Oricorio, though, even though we are getting hit for weakness. We're not an EX Pokemon, so we can one-hit KO Oricorio with this ability, so that does make it a little bit better. Water-type decks are in a bit of a struggle, unfortunately, in the current format. But as far as water evolutions go from the set, we also have Glaceon, which in my mind isn't a terrible Pokemon. For 2 water energies, we do Ice Blade, and then we deal 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So I don't know, like, we'll have to see. Maybe we get like a, honestly, I don't know. Because the thing with Glaceon is like, you would hope that Glaceon EX, if we pull it back up, the issue with Glaceon EX here is that its ability only does damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if this was 10 damage to every single one of your opponent's Pokemon, then this Glaceon would be very, very good, because we could deal 50 damage to the bench and then finish some KOs. So this effectively is a pretty strong Pokemon. It's water type, so we can set this up pretty easily with Manaphy. The 2 energies isn't a big cost, right? We have Misties, we've got Manaphy's, we have the Washout Vaporeon. We have a lot of ways to get 2 energies on this particular Pokemon. 100 HP, so we're getting it KO'd pretty easily, but this is effectively going to be like a game closer. So 50 to the bench does take a KO in a lot of different scenarios. So even 1 copy of Glaceon in like a water type Eevee deck list could potentially allow us to have a win condition. It would perhaps allow us to maybe not have to rely on things like Cyrus or Sabrina, even though we're probably going to be playing those cards anyway. Yeah, I think that Glaceon is okay. It's just weird to me that it doesn't really have great synergy with Glaceon EX. Theoretically speaking, it does have some synergy. We're dealing some chip damage with Glaceon, and then our opponent maybe is forced to retreat, and then we can finish that KO with a small Glaceon. I just don't really feel like either of these cards are that good. That's just how I feel about it. But 50 damage to the bench isn't that bad. And again, we do have a lot of Eevee support. Eevee Cave, which we haven't talked about yet, or Eevee Bag rather, is actually pretty relevant. So all of the eeveelution cards that we've talked about so far, we can deal 10 extra damage, actually 20 extra damage if we have double Eevee Bag in our hand. And that's going to finish some KOs, but this is only to the active Pokemon. So unfortunately, Glaceon here, which does 50 to one of your opponent's Pokemon, if we're hitting the bench, we don't get the damage boost by any of the cards like Red or Giovanni or Eevee Bag. So unfortunately, 50 is 50 locked to the bench. Theoretically speaking, we could hit the active for 60, 70, 80. 90 damage even, I believe, theoretically, with Ice Blade for 2 energies, but, I think most of the time we're going to be utilizing this attack to deal the bench. So it's not a bad Pokemon. It's not. I just don't know if it's like as good. I don't know if it's good enough. We'll have to see exactly what the other type sort of Eevee support cards are, but anyway, let's get into the more like interesting stuff that I think some people are a little bit more, I guess, interested in terms of which cards are going to be good. I really want to spend some time talking about Jolteon. Again, this is a long video. We're going in depth. I wanted to spend some time talking about Jolteon because this new Jolteon card is absolutely broken. This card is crazy. So Jolteon does, for 1 energy, it does 40 damage, but if this Pokemon evolved during this turn, this attack does 20 more. So effectively, for 1 energy on a stage 1 Pokemon, we can do 60 damage. Now 60 is a very, very relevant number. We've seen a ton of Pokemon hit for 50. Zeraora can hit for 50 on turn 2 going first. What is it? There's several others. I'm trying to think. Like Skarmory does 50, Carnivine can do 50, but 60 is different, right? Because 60 is enough to KO so many of those basic Pokemon that you see in rare candy decks. So Jolteon is a direct counter to these particular types of decks that play rare candy, and you have these sort of weak basic Pokemon in the active spot, right? Solgaleo has Cosmog and Morlul, which are at 70 HP. Charizard's got Charmander. There's other examples like Garchomp has Gibble Gibble, which might have 70 HP actually, but that's beside the point. We have Eevee Bag, so that 60 damage could very easily, we could play double Eevee Bag, we could play Giovanni, and that 60 damage on your second turn going first could end up being 70, could end up being 80 if we have like double Eevee Bag, or if we have Giovanni plus Eevee Bag. That's going to be enough to KO even something like a type Null, which has 80 damage. So I really think that Jolteon is massively underrated. I think it's going to be a direct sort of aggressive counterplay to things like all of those rare candy decks, which kind of, struggle when there's basic Pokemon get KO'd, right? They really, Charizard and Garchomp and Solgaleo, those are all decks that really do well because they have the potential to rare candy and evolve into their stage 2 Pokemon on turn 2. So if we're going first, we can actually get that attack off before they're able to rare candy and evolve. And that, I believe, is going to be a massive advantage for Jolteon. And even after this first attack, right? Let's just say we only do 60, right? Or we do 70, whatever it is. And maybe we don't take a KO. Maybe the active Pokemon is like a Giratina or like whatever the case may be. That's okay, because next turn we can just hit for 40, right? And Jolteon only takes 1 energy, so we can take that second turn to just attach to another Pokemon. What we can also pair Jolteon with, because the electric type archetypes is crazy right now, is we can just straight up pair it with Oricorio, right? We literally can. Because it's only a 1 energy attack cost, we can just kind of set up Oricorio on the bench quite easily. Oricorio very, very splashable, so it makes a lot of electric type decks much better in the current format. We also have the new electrical, cord, or where is this? Can we find it? Yeah, right here, the new electrical cord, which of course is better on Pokemon that have multiple energies in their attack cost. That's for sure, and it only works for electric type Pokemon. But, we could of course play this with Jolteon to more effectively be able to, conserve even that 1 energy that we're attaching to Jolteon. That could be fine. We even could just play Rocky Helmet, right? You got to think like we're an aggro deck, right? We're going maximum aggressiveness, so we could just play Rocky Helmet, attach it to that Jolteon, hit for 60, and then if our opponent wants to attack us back, they're going to have to take 20, and that's 80 total damage, plus whatever we do with Giovanni or Red or Eevee Cape. That's just a ton of early damage and pressure that Jolteon can put on. The other card that I really like, to be honest with you, is Zeraora. I think this is a massively underrated card. I don't know if this really synergizes necessarily with Jolteon, but what it does do is act as a proper leadoff option, so that if Zeraora, or if we're not, of course, leading with Eevee in the active spot, or if we're going second, whatever the case may be, Zeraora can act as a free pivot, a free retreat, because its ability gives it a free energy at the end of your first turn. And even if we want to stay in with Zeraora, we can just hit for 50, plus a Giovanni is 60. We're also KOing a lot of those basic Pokemon that are going to be in the active spot. Magnezone is very common right now. Magnemite, I believe, has 60 HP as well. There's a lot of Pokemon. There really, really is a ton of Pokemon in these sort of stage 3 decks that have these low HP basic Pokemon. This is going to be a particular aggressive archetype that does really well, of course, just sort of being overly aggressive and kind of getting on top of the curve on things like that. And again, we have Eevee Bag. So if we go back, like we literally have Eevee Bag to just increase the damage that Jolteon can do on that second turn going first. So I think this is really strong. I think one of the big gaps in Pokemon Pocket right now is the lack of Pokemon that are strong going first. And I think that's a big, downside to Pokemon Pocket in terms of the metagame right now. Jolteon could be a significant answer to that. These turbo, fast-paced electric type decks could be the answer to that. Being able to be good going first is a massive advantage in Pokemon Pocket. And again, Jolteon, even if we are going second, we can still attack, right? So it doesn't matter if we're going first or second. We're hitting you for 60 on that second turn, and that is just in general really strong. That's 60 plus, right? Up to like technically 80 damage, which again is just absolutely insane. We're living in attack from type Null no matter what, so we can go 60 Eevee Cape and then 40 Eevee Cape. That's 110. That's going to be enough to KO Silvally, so that is again very, very relevant. Could even be good in the Silvally head-to-head for sure. I just like Jolteon. If we end up getting a Jolteon EX card that's also aggressive, Jolteon could end up being one of the top archetypes in the entire game. Other Pokemon that you could pair with it, honestly, if we're going the electrical cord route, we could just pair it with like Arceus. We could play like an Arceus package, which wouldn't be that bad. We can conserve energies, come in, just hit for 130. Arceus could be our closing option. We've seen this with Tapu Koko electric type decks right now. Speaking of Tapu Koko, we could literally just play Tapu Koko because it's not a bad Pokemon. And we could, of course, just bring this in as another leadoff option if we don't find Jolteon, and we could just potentially do 20 into 90, just like Tapu Koko likes to do. Jolteon definitely better going first, but Tapu Koko is good going second. So effectively, you probably want to pair Jolteon with another really aggressive option that is strong going second, or I guess also maybe good going first, but not bad going second, things like Zeraora. So there's a lot of options. The electric type right now, I think, is kind of formulating in a way that is really interesting. Jolteon, to me, one of the most underrated cards coming in this particular set. One of the most underrated announced cards to come in Eevee Grove. I think that Jolteon is absolutely broken. I really do. I think Jolteon's crazy. I'm sweating right now. It's so hot in my office, and we're cruising. We're talking so much. But I love diving in depth. I've been thinking about this stuff for the last few days, so I wanted to kind of get all of my thoughts out to you guys. And trust me, when the set releases, we're going to get a ton of decks. Hopefully this video is maybe interesting to you guys. I don't know if it is, but either way, comment down below what you guys think about all this stuff. Next up, we've got Espeon and Umbreon, which I probably will actually end this video on. I'm not going to talk about the sweets cards. We'll maybe leave that for another time. I think they're more meme than anything, but, you know, we'll have to see. Next up is Espeon. So, you know, Espeon, to me, I think people are looking at Espeon, honestly, a little bit incorrectly. I think that people look at Espeon and they think, oh, this is going to be a direct counter to things like Giratina and Darkrai. This is going to be broken in all of these decks, maybe against Charizard, or these decks that just have all of these energies they ramp up. Of course, Giratina and Darkrai, you know, is 2 energy every turn, so it does stack up pretty easily. Espeon here, 100 damage, stage 1, and that's also a psychic type. So we could pair this with other psychic Pokemon and other psychic decks. We could pair it with Sylveon for sure. So we have that 4/4 Eevee Evolution lineup for the psychic type. Could be fine. Energy Crush, 20 damage for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. But keep in mind, this is not like Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele can deal damage to any one of your opponent's Pokemon. So that's the difference, right? Tapu Lele is really strong because it can damage the bench. That's the main reason why Tapu Lele is good. But Espeon has a little bit more HP, but here we are still getting KO'd by Silvally. That's one thing you should keep in mind with all of these non-EX evolutions, is that other than Vaporeon, even actually, to be honest, all of these cards are probably getting absolutely bodied by Silvally. So that's the one scary part about them. Silvally is a little bit dangerous, right? If Silvally's going second. Silvally going second is dangerous no matter what. So we got to keep that in mind. But anyway, 20 damage for any one of your opponent's energies, but it's only to the active Pokemon. So it's not that bad. I don't think we'd ever play Espeon to bring this card in deal a KO, because we're gonna get revenge KO'd pretty easily. The other thing you have to keep in mind is, like, in the late game, if Espeon is dealing a lot of damage, it's because we haven't taken a KO yet and our opponent has a ton of energies on the board. That means that if we bring in Espeon and we take a KO, they're probably going to KO us and then maybe win the game, maybe not, but we're probably not in a position to win the game because Espeon just got KO'd. Also, whenever we take a KO with Espeon, we're likely KOing a Pokemon that has energy attached to it, which effectively nerfs the damage from its attack. So Espeon gets a bit technically stronger as the game goes on, but Espeon gets weaker after it takes a KO on a Pokemon that has energy, right? That's effectively how it works. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be a low energy attack cost Pokemon that theoretically, similarly to Leafeon, like I was talking about earlier, you can actually just bring this in from your first turn going second, or second turn going first rather, and just start attacking, right? You deal 20, maybe they've attached. If you're going first, they wouldn't have attached, but you'd have to evolve anyway. So if you're going first, we can do 20 damage on that second turn, 40 damage on the next turn, and then 60 and so on and so forth. So it could act as this really kind of aggressive kind of ramp up attacker as like a leadoff option. And I think that might even be the better way to play Espeon. It's interesting. If for 1 energy, sure, it's a Pokemon that we can bring in, probably consistently hit like for 60, 80, maybe 100 damage when we bring it in. Hopefully that's enough to take a KO, but again, after we do take a KO with Espeon, our opponent has less energy, so Espeon isn't doing that much damage. And again, like I said, if our opponent has a ton of energies, it's because we haven't taken a KO yet. Like, that's just the reality of it. So Espeon is not going to be able to take 3 prize cards in 1 attack. I just don't love Espeon that much. Again, I do think this card could be really good, especially in certain psychic type decks, because it is a 1 energy attack cost Pokemon. The Eevee cards are going to get a lot of support. We also have Eevee Bag. So, we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think Espeon is like that broken. I do think it's good, but I honestly, out of all of these cards that aren't EX Pokemon, I think that Jolteon so far is my favorite. I think this is the best in my mind, just because it fits well into the electric type archetypes that we have currently already. But anyway, that's how I feel about Espeon. What cards can we pair with it? That's sort of the interesting question, It's tough. We could just pair it with Giratina, right? We could theoretically just sort of sit in the active spot, double up on Giratina. and force our opponent to kind of do something, and we're just swinging for 130 on turn 2, and then later in the game we can bring in Espeon. To be honest with you, I just don't know. Like, Sylveon might even just be like the other option that we pair with Espeon. We played like 4 EVs, 2 Sylveon, 2 Espeon, but then we're just not doing like that much damage. So Espeon definitely feels like a card that you want to pair with like a Pokemon that can tank a lot of hits, do a lot of damage. Maybe it just sees play in that Lunala, archetype, like I said. But I don't know. Like, I don't think it really matters where we're playing Espeon. I think it's a very splashable card. I think it's decent in the early game and the late game. I just don't know if there's like any like solidified archetype in which these psychic type evolutions are going to see play in. Maybe they're just going to see play together with Giratina or with Mewtwo. Who really knows? Honestly, like, we could just be playing a Psychic Pile deck with Lunala or like a Mewtwo Gardevoir package or some crazy stuff like that. Honestly, I have no idea. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I like Espeon. It's just hard for me to really, I guess, think about where exactly it can see play, but that's how I feel about Espeon in terms of how this attack is going to be. I don't know any existing archetypes that this fits very well into. Not many decks play Psychic Energies. Honestly, the only decks that really play Psychic Energies in the format right now, other than like Lunala decks, which are fringe, is like that Silvally Giratina deck, and I just think Espeon's not as good as Silvally, so I think in almost every scenario we would rather play Silvally, honestly. Because Silvally is going to do 100 damage on turn 2 going second, right? And Espeon's only doing 100 damage if your opponent has 5 energies, which probably isn't going to happen until turn 5 or 6. So I don't know how I feel about Espeon. I think it's honestly pretty weak. I know some people were hyping it up, but I just don't really know if I love it that much. Again, it's just how I feel about it. Comment down below how you think people will play Espeon, what decks you like to play him in. I think it could be very good. I don't know. I just don't know off the top of my head where it's going to see play. Lastly, we have Umbreon. So the thing with Umbreon is, again, I think it's a card that's maybe a little bit misunderstood. I think it's not bad. I don't think this card is bad whatsoever. It is a stage 1 Pokemon with 1 energy and its attack cost. So 40 damage, and if the defending Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. Keep in mind, if our opponent evolves, that effect gets eliminated, and then they can just attack us. So again, I'm looking at Umbreon and I'm thinking Silvally is one of the most common Pokemon in the game right now. Sure, we can evolve and then hit type null for 40, but then they're just going to evolve, attach, and then hit us for 100, and then Umbreon is gone. So that's kind of how I feel mostly about Umbreon. I know some people were saying, hey, like Giratina Darkrai, this is a pretty good counter. I guess technically Giratina Darkrai plays 2 copies of Leaf pretty often. They also play Poison Barb and they play Poison. They also can just manually retreat. They're setting up 2 Pokemon at the same time. So yes, we could force them to discard energies and retreat, but to be honest with you, what they can do is just sort of, set up Giratina and Darkrai at the same time, and then just manually retreat whatever's in the active spot, go into that other Pokemon, and then just KO you. So that's how this works. Like, Umbreon doesn't stop, all basic Pokemon from attacking you. It just stops the basic Pokemon that you've attacked from attacking you during their next turn. Also, Buzzwole directly counters this. It's not only weak to Grass, which doesn't even matter anyway, but Buzzwole can double pivot out and remove the effect on Dark Binding. I really don't think Umbreon's that good. I think that you could play Umbreon, hopefully with an Umbreon EX is kind of what I'm hoping for. But as far as other Dark type archetypes go, we've seen cards like this before, honestly. Like, we had Arbok back in the day. You could play like the Poison package with this. Like, theoretically speaking, we could play Poison Barb and Nihilego and Celesteela. We even could just play this with Darkrai. We could leave Umbreon in the active spot, start hitting for 40 damage, and then, of course, attach the excessive or the extra energies to Darkrai, because this is only a 1 energy attack cost, and then just kind of ride out from there, right? And deal some chip damage, deal 40, maybe lock our opponent from attacking. But again, Umbreon's going to get revenge KO'd pretty easily. Your opponent can always just set up a bench Pokemon or evolve. A lot of evolution going on in the format right now. This could be a direct, really hard counter to some specific decks. I don't think Giratina Darkrai is going to be one of those particularly. But yeah, I think that maybe pairing this with maybe the Poison Dark package, maybe something like a Weezing could be pretty fun. You could bring in Weezing, you could Poison, then come in with Umbreon, have Nihilego on the bench, Dark Binding, maybe lock them in. It's an interesting kind of control type strategy. Again, we'll bring this up. We'll show these off a little bit, right? So Nihilego, of course, you guys all know what this particular card does. It boosts the poison damage. So you could play like Nihilego and you could play Poison Barb, right? You could do all of this stuff. Force your opponent to get poisoned. You could even just play like Weezing and Koga, which is like a really old strategy, which is kind of funny, which probably won't see much play, but you could play Weezing. You could come in, poison, Koga up Weezing, and then of course go into Umbreon and put the lock on for basic Pokemon. Like I said, a lot of decks in the format right now aren't playing only basic Pokemon. In fact, the only decks that are playing only basic Pokemon are, I think, Buzzwole decks, which again, completely negate the effect of Umbreon, and Giratina Darkrai, which I think probably won't struggle with Umbreon much at all anyway, because of all of the extra extra damage that it's doing and its ability to set up 2 Pokemon in the same turn. But yeah, so I think Darkrai might even be the best option. But hopefully, and again, I know this is just speculation, but hopefully we do get like an Umbreon EX or some type of card that comes out in the set that actually just pairs really well with Umbreon. That could be really cool. Like if we had a bench sitting Pokemon that said, hey, like, if this Pokemon's on your bench, your opponent can't evolve or things like that. You know, you could even theoretically pair Umbreon with Aerodactyl, which could be pretty funny. Theoretically speaking, Aerodactyl would not be able to attack, but what it does do with Primeval Law is force your opponent to not be able to evolve their active Pokemon to more consistently get the lock on with Umbreon. But again, they can always set up their bench and then they can just sort of come in and then KO Umbreon, and then it's like, what are we doing from there, you know? So there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that going around. Umbreon is just a little bit too awkward for me. Abilities like this, we've seen them before in Pokemon Pocket, and I just don't think they're like that good. They're not like good enough. But maybe, who knows? Maybe we get a really strong partner for Umbreon and something kind of comes out and it's really, really fun. And it's a really nice kind of control archetype. We'll have to see. But it's interesting because this is a dark type energy and we don't have like any other Umbreon cards, which kind of makes me feel like we might be getting some other type of like EX card, right? That's my sort of opinion. Like if I had to guess, which other evolutions would get EX Pokemon in the set, it would probably be Umbreon and it would be Jolteon, just because they don't have colorless energy in their attack cost, right? You have to use whatever energy you have to use, being electric type or dark, but we also don't have any other versions of these Pokemon. So there would never be a scenario where you could play 4 Eevees and then, you know, play like 4 Jolteon. Or actually, no, we do have another Jolteon card. I forgot to mention that actually. So theoretically Jolteon, maybe not, because we already have another Jolteon. I don't know if I ever showed this, but there is an old Jolteon, which actually isn't that bad. This card saw some play back in the day. For 2 energies, we can do 40 damage, flip 4 coins, 40 for each head. So theoretically, we could just pop off for 160. Actually, probably not even that bad. You could even just play like 2 Zeraora, and then like 4 Eevee, 4 of this Jolteon, and the other, or 2 of this Jolteon and 2 of the other Jolteon, and probably wouldn't even be that bad. So it kind of makes me like Jolteon even more. I think Jolteon's gonna be really, really fun, actually. Electrical Cord allows us to go into maybe that second Jolteon more easily. Hopefully we're flipping coins, so it is of course inconsistent, but yeah, I actually like Jolteon a lot. So yeah, I mean, maybe we get an Espeon EX, but we have Sylveon. They're both psychic types, so that would be a little bit awkward. We already have Glaceon EX. We already have Leafeon EX. We have like 5 Vaporeon, so getting Vaporeon EX would be weird. So my top picks would probably be Jolteon and Umbreon if we were going to get additional evolution cards that they haven't shown yet. Sure, you might say like, well, if they were coming out with additional, you know, EX Eevee cards, then we probably would have seen them already. We've seen 3 already. In the announcement trailer. Eevee technically counts, even though it's like a basic Pokemon. So what I suspect is that we're probably going to get 5 or 6, maybe 7 EX Pokemon in this mini set. So keep that in mind. There's definitely a couple that we haven't seen yet. I wouldn't be surprised if all of the EX Pokemon in this set were evolution cards, but maybe not. Maybe it's just these 2 for whatever the reason. But like I said, we have Flareon, we have Sylveon, we have Glaceon, we have Leafeon now. So all we need is Espeon, Umbreon, Jolteon, Vaporeon. We'll see. We'll see if we get them. Very possible that we get EX versions of all of the cards, and then we have sort of this sort of package where you can play these sort of 4-4 lineups of all of these evolution cards and play very consistent stage 1 decks. So we're going to end this video on just some last speculation. There are a couple of different types of cards that I believe could come in the set that haven't been announced yet. So we're going full speculation now. Again, this was a long video. This was a long one, guys. I apologize, but we're getting all of our thoughts out there until the cards are released and we get all of the decks, you know, crunched out and all of the strategies really refined. Really interesting. We'll do like a full set review quickly when the full set gets released. But anyway, a couple of cards that I think could be included in the set that maybe they're hiding from us up to this point. In my mind, it could be 2 things in particular, but really 3 things in particular. The first one is going to be something like Rainbow Energy. So Rainbow Energy is something that maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Pokemon Pocket because energies in Pokemon Pocket aren't cards. I'm like, yeah, thanks, Captain Obvious, right? But that doesn't mean that they couldn't release a card that generates an energy, right? Maybe it's called something else or whatever. But I believe that this would be the perfect set to introduce like multi-energy or dual energy support into Pokemon Pocket. I think one of the main downsides, one of the biggest drawbacks to Pokemon Pocket right now, and since it's been released, is the inability to have any sort of consistency or flexibility in a deck list that's playing more than one energy type. It's just random, and that feels quite bad. So they could release a card, maybe an eeveelution or an Eevee specific card that just says, hey, attach a rainbow energy to your Pokemon. It counts as any energy type. That would be really, really cool because it would allow us to to play, of course, 4 copies of the Eevee, and then multiple different, types of evolutions of different energy types. You could play Umbreon and Espeon. You could play, Leafeon and Jolteon. So it would be really cool to get some multi-energy support like this, because it would greatly increase the flexibility of which we can build all of these decks with not only the Eevee cards, but maybe any cards in Pokemon Pocket. I do think it might have to be limited. It would have to maybe be limited to just Eevee cards, because it would absolutely break the game. It would bust it wide open, and there would be a million new strategies that are so good, because a card like this could really open up the possibility. So maybe they sort of leave it specifically for evolution cards, but even if they did, I wouldn't be that upset, because it would allow us to be a little bit more flexible and creative in how we're playing the evolution cards and building evolution decks. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like a Rainbow Energy, or an item card that generated an energy, or an item card that could allow us to change the type of energy that we had attached to our Pokemon or in our energy zone. Something like this to me could be really, really cool. And honestly, this would be the perfect opportunity to include a card like this in Pokemon Pocket in this evolution set, with all of these different types of, evolution cards, right? Of different types. That's what Eevee's all about, right? So it would make a lot of sense to see a card like this. Again, all speculation. The next thing that I think could also come in the set that, again, hasn't been announced or anything, is going to be something like DEVOLUTION Spray. So this is a card that allows you to devolve one of your Pokemon, and then you put it back into your hand, the highest stage evolution that's attached to your Pokemon. We could get a card like this that, again, is Eevee specific, but as we see here, the drawback is that, the Pokemon that you devolve can't evolve back this turn. Maybe we get rid of that restriction for this particular card in this example. If you go back and you take a look at some of these cards, it would make sense actually to see a card like this see play. This right here says this Pokemon can evolve into any Pokemon that evolves from Eevee. If you play it from your hand onto this Pokemon can evolve during the first turn that you play it. So that makes sense, right? That's just normal evolution. But if you take a look at something like Sylveon and you read the ability, this says once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may draw 2 cards. So theoretically speaking, if we had DEVOLUTION Spray, I don't know if exactly how the wording goes, but we could evolve Sylveon, play the DEVOLUTION Spray, evolve Sylveon again, but maybe we can't, and then maybe that specific wording is a restriction onto Eevee so that we can't actually do that. The DEVOLUTION Spray would be really cool, because what it would allow us to do, alongside like something like multi-energy support, it could allow us to, of course, evolve like into Jolteon, hit for that 60 damage, and then devolve Jolteon, evolve into whatever other evolution that we wanted to, maybe change the energy. We could be super flexible in our patterns, in our playstyles, and how we're kind of flowing throughout the deck. I know this is very much a stretch, but something like this would make a lot of sense. Again, if we go back here, something like Jolteon does kind of make sense with something like a DEVOLUTION Spray. This reads that it does the damage the turn this Pokemon was evolved. You know what I mean? So it kind of reads that it's like, okay, so like maybe we can like devolve it and then evolve it again and then get the boost from this damage. That could be something that is really, really cool. I would love to see something like that for sure. But again, cards like Glaceon, cards like Jolteon, cards like Espeon, and cards like Umbreon, these are all cards to me that feel like I would love to be able to play them all into one deck with 4 copies of Eevee and have all of these different options as to which cards I want to use in which given scenario. So allowing us to have multi-energy support, things like Rainbow Energy or DEVOLUTION Spray, would give us the ability to play these really kind of rainbowy, flexible Eevee decks that could be super, super fun and creative, not only in how we play them, but in how we build the deck. So speculation, all speculation. I don't know if that's what they're doing. If this is what ends up happening, then, I predicted it, and we can come back to this video and you guys can tell me how smart I am, or none of this comes to fruition, and maybe literally everything we talked about in this video from a speculative standpoint is just incorrect. So again, we can all dream. That's what we're doing here. We're dreaming. But I think that there's so much potential to these cards. What we could see, honestly, as well, is like an Evolution Incense card, or like some type of a supporter card or a trainer card that searches your deck for a stage 1 evolution Pokemon. Like, it would be very easy for them to make that. I would not be surprised at all. Something basically like Glaceon has, or Silvally has with Glaceon, but it's like, hey, just pull out a Pokemon that evolves from Eevee from your deck, a random Pokemon that evolves from Eevee from your deck, whether it's an item card or a supporter card. Probably something like that could be very, very possible in this particular set to give these Eevee decks a bit more consistency. We already have Eevee Bag, which is incredibly strong, so maybe we just pair Eevee Bag with whatever that new supporter card is or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a card like that either, so keep that in mind. Those are my 3 sort of speculatory cards or strategies, or I guess integrations that they might include for the set that they have not announced yet. So Anyway, guys, there it is. We're going to wrap up the video here. This was literally an hour-long video, just an absolute like podcast. We talked for so long, but I think there's a lot of potential and new cards come out and I'm always really, really excited about it. So I wanted to really just kind of sit down, gather all of my thoughts as to how I'm planning to build decks around these cards, how we can expect to utilize these cards in deck lists. And then I just wanted to kind of showcase and I guess, you know, just give it all to you guys in this video. Maybe you guys watch this, maybe you kind of absorb this and you kind of run with it. Maybe not, who knows? None of this stuff could end up being proper or correct. It's all kind of speculation. Just sort of early planning, early ideas. Even if, I mean, we don't know what the cards are coming in the set. A lot of the stuff that we talked about between all of the Pokemon will be relevant because we know what the cards are. So we know how we're supposed to play them and how they're going to be good. We just don't know necessarily yet what we can pair with them. We'll have to wait and see. So you guys are going to want to stay tuned for that for sure, because we're going to be making deck lists all over the place and talking strategies and stuff, talking meta. That's what it's all about here on the channel. So yeah, that's a long one today. It's a very long one. I know some people like the long videos. I'll add timestamps here for the people that are interested. But yeah, definitely a long one today. I do apologize. Hopefully you guys, you know, were somewhat, I don't know. Hopefully you guys like this video. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, the last metagame, the last format is behind us. 2 days left. We're just waiting. We're just waiting for Eevee Grove to release. Theoretically speaking, it comes out on the 26th. So that's technically speaking, it's like tomorrow night if you're going to stay up until like 1 or 2 in the morning when the set releases, which we will be doing. We'll probably be live on YouTube or live in the Discord, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. We'll probably upload a video tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe we get some data mines. Maybe we get some leaks tomorrow. You never really know. Maybe they've already come out in the hour-long time it took us to record this video. Honestly, who knows? But all right, guys, let's get out of here. It's a long one, super long one. I apologize. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned. Tons of videos coming on the channel. I'm super excited. Hopefully you guys are excited. Comment down below what you guys think. I can't wait. Yeah. All right. Let's get out of here, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah, bye.